It's starting. So we're live there, live here. We have one more to go live. I love that it shows the notification on both.
Yeah.
See that?
Yeah.
And you are now live. Here we go.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Donna Cranston with Defenders of Freedom and Dr. Michelle Eisenman with Resiliency Brain Health. And as you know, we've been talking each Tuesday in March about traumatic brain injury awareness. And so that's what we're going to continue our conversation here today. So, today, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is the relationship to a concussion
Okay.
and a TBI,
Yeah.
or the relationship of those two. So, what are the other diagnoses? Instead of, if I don't get diagnosed with a TBI, what might I be told?
Okay. So that's a really valid question. I think there's a lot of confusion in the general population because TBIs, and that's an AKA for concussion, minor TBIs and concussions are the same thing. We often get other diagnoses that can make certain people feel like it's a conundrum, right? So you often hear, well, I got diagnosed with a concussion and a vestibular disorder and dysautonomia. And so to kind of label those out a little better, some that we have written down here are dysautonomia, vestibular disorders, um, gastrointestinal disorders, some like gastroparesis. Um, Sleep disorders is actually one of them as well. Anxiety and depression can also stem from it, although we're not talking about major anxiety and depression. So those are some of the diagnoses that we see that are very common with people that have concussions, and that can be very overwhelming because if you don't understand the connection in between the brain and all these other systems, then you're going to think, oh my gosh, this is really overwhelming. I no longer just have one issue, I have like seven going on.
Hmm.
And how do I even begin to process that?
Hmm. Okay. Well, and so how are they then related to concussions?
Yeah. So that is a really great question because the second part of that is these are the diagnoses, but how can I make a relationship to dysautonomia, for example?
And will you
So,
explain what that is?
yes, so for anyone that doesn't know dysautonomia, it means there is, hello, Dr. Godet, there is a challenge in the autonomic nervous system. So it quite literally means dysfunction in the autonomic nervous system.
Okay.
And for those that don't know, the autonomic nervous system is the one that handles fight or flight or rest and digest, as we all very well know it. So a lot of people in the concussion realm are very in tune with what it feels like to be in fight or flight,
Hmm.
kind of just that go, go, go mechanism and not really being able to turn it off. That's one of the symptoms and one of the things that people look at. But the other one that I find people don't really understand very well until we tell them in the office is the autonomic nervous system is in charge of your heart rate, your blood pressure, your respiration rate, and all of these automatic things that should be happening in our brains and bodies that don't become very automatic anymore. So that's a good explanation of dysautonomia.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's how the brain injury is manifesting itself.
Yeah.
That's a good way to say that?
Yeah,
Or-
yeah. And
Okay.
I think a lot of people also get confused because you have a person with a concussion and they have a lot of dysautonomia symptoms versus another person that may have a lot of vestibular issues.
Okay.
And so that can be very confusing for people as well because then they go, well, there's not a rule of thumb to say if I have a concussion, I must have sleep disorders and GI disturbances and all that stuff.
Okay.
But every person can have a little bit of all, a little bit of more than some, and maybe even not have an issue in some of those categories too.
So can I have a concussion but not have a brain injury?
No. So you
Okay.
definitely, if you have a concussion, then you definitely, most definitely have a brain injury. Now,
Okay.
the distinction in that, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, is the severity of it. So you have a minor traumatic brain injury. There's also a moderate and a severe. So, like we said previously, a lot of people think traumatic is, laying in your bed with like the blinds closed, complete darkness, you probably had your skull ripped open. That's more of a severe
Okay.
traumatic brain injury, but concussion is definitely a minor traumatic brain injury.
Okay. And so each one of these could be presenting itself by itself in a standalone presentation, but that's still a brain injury.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's really difficult sometimes, and that's what Dr. Godet and I do a lot in the office is okay, that's why we do the neurological examination. So for those that don't understand, this is why a history, a bedside neurological examination and the diagnostics are very important because even though you have a, concussion, it's not necessarily okay, everyone's going to have deficiency in this. Everyone there's varying degrees to it. And some people may show a little bit more of a deficiency in their vestibular system. And for those that don't know, that is one of the systems that's involved in balance. And so you have your people that are like, I can't even get in a car. I mean, I get so dizzy. And then you have people that go, actually, riding in a car isn't too bad for me, but going from sitting to standing and laying to standing, woof, that's too much.
And is that because of the area of the brain that has been impacted
That
or the
can be.
concussion?
That can be.
Okay.
You actually bring up a really important point that I think sometimes we're so involved in this world that we forget about these little tidbits. But a really big point to say is, let's say you got impacted right here in the forehead. We
Okay.
can safely assume you're probably going to have some frontal lobe deficits, but you don't necessarily need to be impacted specifically in one singular area to experience deficits in another area.
Okay.
So the reason for that is because the brain is made of neural networks and connections. So if you're connected like so, and you have an impact on this side of the brain, there is a feedback loop coming from this side, sending information or receiving information from another area of the brain. So if one area of the brain is impacted, that send and receive is not really registering very well, and so that's how some people get confused. Like, well, what is that? Now I understand the function of the brain. So I know that my occipital lobe, which is the back part of the head, is a lot with vision. Well, I hit myself here. So how come I have issues there? So it's because there is a connection in between the whole brain. And so that's when we start kind of figuring out clues on, okay, it's this side of the brain that maybe is feeding here that we have a big deficit.
Okay. So our next question is why do some people have additional diagnosis and some don't? Which I think just in your explanation of that is probably pretty telling.
Mhm.
But what would you say about that? Why do some people have a diagnosis and others don't?
I think some of them go misdiagnosed. Some people actually do go misdiagnosed. There's a lot of people that, um, you know, sometimes it can be a little trivial because we know that you have a concussion, so you're most likely going to struggle with X, Y, or Z.
Okay.
So some people really need the label for validation and understanding, how to get past something, which is, very good. Some people labels actually do a lot of harm to them because they tend to perseverate on it. But the other reason that to touch base on, other than a misdiagnosis, is because the brain, the way that your brain is functioning, and also really what you do on a daily basis. And so, what you've done, neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt. So, let's say you've always been very good at, let's say, penmanship and handwriting, and you do that for a profession. There's a high likelihood that you're going to show less deficits actually in that area of the brain, be, as opposed to maybe some autonomic concerns because you've been neuroplastically working on that pathway for so long.
Okay.
So that's an aspect that people don't really think about. It can definitely still be hampered, but it may not be as strong as other areas of the brain. And then purely for the reason of every person is very bio individual. So
Hmm.
if we compare a male to a female having a brain injury, they're going to have different manifestations as well.
Okay. So as as people move through their life and they have these adjustments that they just get used to because of the brain injury and they have just adapted to that, is it important for them to get treatment, or as the brain just adapts and can overcome those deficiencies, that's their new normal?
Yeah, that's a great point because I do have a lot of people. I think the high functioning class, which is the concussion minor TBI class, has a big confusion on, okay, well, when do I know that I need help and when can I just fix my lifestyle and it kind of fixes itself?
Hmm.
Because it's hard. I mean, you look at yourself and you're like, well, you look fine, but quality of life isn't great, but we can definitely push through it. So at what point do you seek out help? Um, Number one, you can't really get away from lifestyle. So you can't really set fuel to the fire while trying to put out the fire at the same time. So that's one thing that everyone's going to have to address on their own time and in their own journey. I think the really great point to actually seek help is when you know that you're doing things in your lifestyle that should be producing good results and you're still really struggling. Or even if you do need help with that lifestyle, because sometimes people really focus on that willpower aspect
Hmm.
of, no, I am going to cut alcohol or sugar or carbs cold turkey, and I'm never going to do it again. And then you find yourself just falling on that bandwagon over and over and over. That may actually be a good time to say, okay, I may need actual help. And the other point that I want to put to that is your brain doesn't know what it doesn't know. There's only so much that you can do with lifestyle until you may actually need to seek out help from someone else to show you the areas of deficits that you're not even aware of.
Okay, that's important too, I think.
That is really
And
important.
because a lot of times a spouse or significant other will see that in people before that. We see that a lot. They see it before the veteran actually does, and that's why they will end up coming in, because their significant other has seen it and has tried to live with the and compensating with it.
Yeah, and we have had a lot of patients in the past that, the first day is a very big discovery day
Yes.
for themselves.
Yes.
They start noticing, wow, okay, I guess my hand doesn't move the way I thought it did, or I guess I don't track the way I thought I tracked. I think for this population, for the Defenders of Freedom population, a big one tends to be the eye movement exam
Hmm.
because one thing that they're very good at is focusing on targets, being able to pursue targets for their occupation. And so then they see the results and they're like, wow, okay, I guess I didn't do that as well as I thought I did, or maybe I did it well then and maybe not now. So that's a big point to it.
Okay. In just the last couple minutes that we have left, because we have a veteran population that we serve, and we're talking about mild TBIs or mild concussions, what are some things that they didn't have to maybe be blown up?
Oh yeah.
What are some other things that could contribute to mild concussions for them?
Oh, well, there is a really great video that we want to put out soon. About that, but pretty much anything that requires any sort of force, it doesn't have to be necessarily like specific impact to the head. It can be impact to the body as well. A lot of people think like, oh, well, I only hit my body, not my head, so I should be fine. And that's not actually true. It does actually impact the whole brain as well. And I think that certain firearms, when you do shoot certain firearms, they do have this repulsive effect.
Hmm.
um, Blast injuries, as you've already talked about, is a big one that even some people don't realize because they don't recognize that that barrier pushing into them and they're absorbing in their body can actually do something to their brain as well. But I think that the number one that people don't realize in this population is if you received impact to your body, it can still affect your brain. You don't
Okay.
need specific impact just to your head.
Okay. Okay, well, that about wraps up our 15 minutes here today,
That was
which
fast.
did go by very fast.
Yeah.
But if you have questions, you suspect maybe you have a brain injury, please reach out to us. You can reach out to me at defendersoffreedom.us, or you can reach out to Dr. Eisenman, or Dr. Godet at resiliencybh.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I can help here. I always forget that I can help you. Bye.